Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to Curious Kingdom. Today we are recapping horror suspense movie The Traveler. The movie commences with a faint scene of a young girl named Mary Black having a delightful time playing with her cat in a forest. Initially filled with happiness, she enjoys the company of her pet. However, when her cat, Shining, runs away, she chases after it, and tragedy strikes as a child killer takes her life, turning her world upside down. The story then shifts to a quiet Christmas Eve at a New York police station, where two rain-soaked policemen, Hawkins and Pine, purposely irritate Galoy, the front desk officer responsible for station cleanliness. Meanwhile, Jeannie and Sherwood are engrossed in paperwork in another room and become overly comfortable with each other. Hawkins and Pine enter their space and playfully tease them. They also mention the lack of reception due to a storm, dampening the holiday spirit. In a different office, Detective Black listens to a voicemail from his estranged wife, expressing her need for space as their relationship has never been the same since Mary's tragic passing. The devastating death of Mary profoundly affects Black, who, being a detective, feels the weight of his inability to save his own daughter. Their emotional turmoil makes it challenging for Black to perform his duties. A mysterious man enters the police station and approaches Galoy, confessing to murder. Galoy panics and calls for backup. When everyone arrives, Black takes charge and leads the man to the interrogation room, reprimanding Galoy for his reaction. Soon after, local stormtroopers inform the officers about an accident on the interstate that will take all night to clear up, leading to the diversion of traffic and closure of the off-ramp. Intrigued by the man's confession, Hawkins asks about the victim, but the man remains vague, playing mind games that unsettle Hawkins. Black intervenes and brings the interview back on track, starting by asking the man for his name. Strangely, the man insists that he's nobody, leaving Detective Black suspicious of his intentions. Black warns him about the consequences of making false statements, but the man persists, claiming that by the end of the night, he will prove his involvement in a murder. Feeling uneasy, Black orders standard procedures on the man, such as obtaining his fingerprints and a mugshot to check for any records. As they proceed, the man, whom they refer to as Mr. Nobody, comments on Black's customized pen with the inscription, "To the best daddy in the world," seemingly mocking him. He then shockingly confesses to 6 murders. In another room, officers Jeannie and Sherwood share an intimate moment under the mistletoe, but their encounter is disrupted by a strange apparition of Mr. Nobody at the door, which vanishes upon closer inspection, dampening the atmosphere. During the process of taking mugshots, Hawkins witnesses what appears to be blood oozing from Mr. Nobody's head through the lens, but upon further examination, there's nothing visible. Pine then discovers that Mr. Nobody has no fingerprints at all, adding to the mystery surrounding him. Galoy is tasked with locking up Mr. Nobody, but as he leads him down the hallway, the lights flicker and burn simultaneously. When Mr. Nobody whistles an eerie tune, Galoy is startled to see him walking toward him despite having just locked him in his cell. Astonishingly, Mr. Nobody is still inside the cell when Galoy checks again. Back in Black's office, Hawkins and Pine report their findings, perplexed by the absence of fingerprints. They explore various possibilities, but find it implausible for the prints to be completely eradicated. As time passes, the flickering lights become bothersome, but with all the extra bulbs smashed, they have no choice but to endure it. Hawkins decides to confront Mr. Nobody directly about his identity, but the man maintains his enigmatic stance. Hawkins becomes intrigued by the tune Mr. Nobody whistles, claiming it's Mozart's Requiem, the death mass, which further unnerves him, prompting him to leave the man alone. Meanwhile, Black struggles on the phone with his wife, frustrated by the strained relationship and the difficulty of spending Christmas apart from the family. The emotional turmoil affects his ability to communicate with their children during the holiday season. A chilling flashback to the past resurfaces, intensifying the already dreadful night. Detective Black instructs Pine to bring Mr. Nobody in for further questioning. However, Hawkins seems uneasy when asked to assist, and the flickering lights give an eerie sense of impending danger. Upon reaching the cells, they discover Mr. Nobody missing from his assigned cell and instead find him in a different one, accompanied by Pine's deck of cards, which baffles them. Meanwhile, Hawkins, while smoking, becomes anxious as he remembers their past involvement in torturing a drifter into falsely confessing to Mary's murder. Pine confronts him, pointing out the resemblance between Mr. Nobody and the tortured drifter, and considers it a disturbing coincidence that all this occurred on the same night as their cruel actions. Despite this revelation, Pine dismisses it and suggests they have a few drinks later to ease Hawkins' nerves. In the interrogation room, Mr. Nobody chillingly confesses to his first victim, describing her as a woman with blue hair, long legs, and a red dress. Simultaneously, Hawkins checks the cells downstairs but finds himself trapped in darkness, assuming Goloi is playing a prank. As Mr. Nobody narrates his scenario, an unknown entity viciously attacks Hawkins, replicating the horrors Hawkins inflicted on the Drifter. The brutal attack leaves Hawkins whipped to death, tied to the window, exposing a tattoo that Mr. Nobody eerily described earlier. Upon Black's return to the interrogation room, he notices Mr. Nobody's magically uncuffed hands. Suspecting him further, he quickly orders Mr. Nobody's hands to be cuffed again and locks the room before informing the others about Hawkins' tragic demise. Black and the rest of the team search outside as Pine and Goloi find Mary's deceased cat, Shining, unexpectedly falling from the roof. They inform the team about the discovery without mentioning Mary's name, sensitive to Black's grief. Pine shares his observation that Hawkins acted strangely before his death, mentioning the resemblance between Mr. Nobody and the Drifter. This prompts a vivid flashback of their past torture of the Drifter, where all 6 of them brutally abused him, forcing a false confession to Mary's murder. Black, driven by desperation and frustration, took it to an inhumane extreme, stabbing the Drifter with the pen Mary had given him. It becomes evident that their actions, carried out as supposed enforcers of justice, were an abuse of authority and utterly inhumane to a Drifter who claimed he was innocent. The haunting memory they desperately wished to forget resurfaced, tormenting their minds and lives. Detective Black apologizes as they recall the terrible events, and Sherwood tries to justify their actions by clinging to the hope that Mary might have still been alive at that time. However, Goloi brutally confronts them with the truth. Mary was already dead, and the state police had killed the actual suspect, rendering the Drifter innocent. A heated dispute erupts, and Goloi even points a shotgun at them, but Black steps in, acknowledging that they are all responsible for what happened that night. Goloi blames Black for forcing them to lie about the Drifter attacking them first, leading them to defend themselves. The tension is broken by loud noises and heavy footsteps from the roof, diverting their attention. Black instructs Pine and Goloi to investigate the roof while he and the couple check on Mr. Nobody. Separated from Goloi, Pine becomes vulnerable to the sinister entity's actions. A rope appears, hanging Goloi, while Mr. Nobody narrates about his second victim, describing him as a coward complicit in the night of torture. In a flashback, Goloi watches in distress as they torment the Drifter, but he fails to intervene, becoming an accomplice and carrying the guilt of the assault. Pine returns to find Goloi missing, and as Goloi nears his death, memories flood back to when he strung up the Drifter, desperately pleading his innocence. Tragically, Goloi meets his end. Following the incident, they start suspecting that Mr. Nobody has something to do with the strange occurrences, even though he remains cuffed in the interrogation room. The situation becomes increasingly eerie and uncertain as the night unfolds. They promptly transfer Mr. Nobody back to his cell, where he utters blasphemous words seemingly related to the series of deaths at the station. Detective Black seizes the opportunity to question him about Mary's murder a year ago, and the Drifter they arrested, who had no fingerprints like Mr. Nobody. However, they don't receive any meaningful answers. Pine decides to investigate whether the Drifter is still in a coma, thinking he might still be a suspect in the ongoing events. They contact the Crestdale Care Center, and are shocked to learn that the Drifter died at the exact time Mr. Nobody arrived at the station, as recorded by Goloi. The eerie coincidence unnerves them, and Black suggests seeking additional help. However, when they attempt to use the telephone again, there's no signal, complicating their situation. Acting quickly, they split into 2 groups to reach the stormtroopers for assistance. The couple heads out into the harsh weather towards the troopers' car parked in the forest. Meanwhile, Pine and Black remain at the station and continue Mr. Nobody's confession as he talks about his next victim. Outside, the couple experiences strange occurrences with the radio, hearing messages from a year ago, recounting Mary's dreadful death. As they investigate further, Sherwood tragically falls into a trap and meets a gruesome fate, suffering the same violence he had once inflicted on the Drifter. Back at the station, Mr. Nobody appears invincible, effortlessly evading bullets as he continues his chilling confession. As he narrates Sherwood's murder, Sherwood meets his brutal demise in the forest, facing karma for his past actions. Jeannie discovers Sherwood's lifeless body and rushes back to the station to inform Pine and Black. Black realizes that Mr. Nobody is killing them through his confessions, making them victims of their own actions. He draws a parallel to history, likening Mr. Nobody's actions to condemned victims returning as vengeful spirits to harm their execution, just like how executioners at the guillotine would barricade themselves in fear. The situation becomes even more sinister and otherworldly as the night unfolds. The chilling truth is revealed as they realize that the spirit of the Drifter has taken the form of Mr. Nobody for revenge. The blame ultimately falls on Detective Black for accusing and torturing the Drifter, but he explains that he was only trying to save his daughter. They plan to escape in the squad car Genie used, but the spirit prevents them from leaving, causing a fatal wreck. Mr. Nobody begins another confession, stating it is the worst. Genie becomes trapped in the car and tragically suffocates, while Black and Pine are unable to save her in time. Each death is a painful reminder of the evil deeds they inflicted on the Drifter. Pine decides to confront Mr. Nobody, leading to his own violent death. Mr. Nobody attacks him mercilessly, quoting an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, before taking his eye, mirroring Pine's past actions. With his entire team gone, Black becomes disoriented, haunted by hallucinations of Mr. Nobody. He eventually finds himself back at the station, where Mr. Nobody awaits him, claiming all roads lead to this place, where it all began and will end. In a surprising twist, Black confesses that he was the one who murdered Mary, the child killer. He admits that the Drifter wasn't innocent after all, and his revenge was driven by the year he spent in a coma. As Mr. Nobody prepares to end Black, Black injures his ears with his pen, preventing him from hearing the final confession. He hides under his office table, where he experiences a clear illusion of Mary offering her help. Mary reveals the secret to defeating Mr. Nobody by revealing his real name, Stanley Harperton. Armed with this knowledge, Black confronts Stanley with his real name and shoots him, causing him to disappear. The movie concludes with Black having a brief, bittersweet reunion with Mary, finally finding peace. The terrifying ordeal comes to an end, leaving a haunting and thought-provoking tale of vengeance and redemption. That's all for today, folks. Like, share, and subscribe for more such content. Curious Knight signing off. Stay safe, stay curious.